I'm going to make an assumption, but it may be an incorrect assumption, but that many of you in this room loved reading as a child, or you love reading now, okay? There are some people in this room, I'm sure, that didn't love reading as a child, right? But always recognize that not everybody loves reading. And especially if you're working with most children, especially our K-1-2, they come to school, they're excited, they want to learn how to read. But if you're working with older students that have not mastered it, they know that they don't know how to read. And they don't love it anymore, right? And so they're like, oh, I have to do this reading thing, and I got to do it with somebody, and I can't hide. Because if you're in a group of, 32 students, I can maybe hide, but it's one-on-one, it's a little harder. So always recognizing that not everybody loves to read. But the reason we don't love to read, anybody know why children don't love to read? Because it's hard and they can't do it, right? That's actually why, because they actually want to read. Because I do a lot of work with older, like middle school and high school students as well. And they're like, I don't want anybody to know I can't read, so they shut down. They don't want to try because they failed. So our job is to help them to be successful. Okay, so let's dive into creating children that love to read. So there are really 3 things that make us love to read. And if you are a person that loves to read, you had these 3 things when you were learning, right? So number 1 is the environment, okay? So that we feel, and that's kind of what I was talking about before. It feels safe. We're feeling successful. We feel connected. We have relationships. But the other really critical thing that I want to share with you, because those other ones are kind of obvious, is routine. We all like routine. Who has a schedule? We do the same thing at the same time every day, right? We know exactly what we're doing, right? We all like routines. And children really love routines, too. They like the structure because they just feel more secure and they feel more confident, right? So I think what matters is that when you work with the students that you're working with, that you have a set routine with them. I don't know that the routine is what matters, but just that you're consistent is what matters. You always do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Because that will make them feel more secure, more confident. I'm like, okay, I know what to expect when I go read with that person. So if you ever have students that are hesitant to work with you, it could be that they're just a little nervous or a little worried, like what's going to happen, right? Because sometimes when somebody pulls you aside, what can that mean? You did something wrong or you're doing, right? And we don't want them. Like, this is our routine. This is what we always do. And that actually helps reduce some of that possible anxiety that a student could potentially have. Not all of them will. Others are going to be like, yeah, let's go. So remember, you have that huge range of reaction with students when you're working with them, okay? But I'm going to share with you a routine to use today that every time you sit down and read a book with a child, that you can use this routine if you like. If you don't like it, you can change it. But I am going to share mine with you, okay? So that's one of the things I'll share with you today. The second element is that it has to be engaging and relevant. They have to care, right? If I don't care about this, I'm not going to engage or pay attention, right? So we have to make it relevant for them. And I'm going to say the other element of this is choice. So whenever we can bring in an element of choice for our students, that helps. And I'll talk about all these and model it more. But the most important thing on this one is that let me back up. All learning has to attach to previous learning. Let me say that again. All learning has to attach to previous learning. So if you don't help students connect what they're doing with what they already know, that will not stick, okay? So we're going to talk about that today as well, like the importance of that. Because if I'm not connecting it, your brain has all these things that are wiring, flying around in there and connecting. And if it has nothing to connect to, it just fades off into the sunset. And everything that you just did goes away, okay? So that's critical. And then the third one is success. We talked about that earlier. Like, if I feel successful, I will want to do it more. If I'm celebrated, whatever the celebration is, sometimes it has to be a little celebration, but that's okay. If I feel successful, I'm going to want to do more of that, okay? So we are going to look at strategies for each one of these. Okay, so using routines, okay? So I already talked about the first one when I kind of talked about connection. So it's just saying, hey, good morning. We sometimes are working with students that have complex lives. And so having that routine, that structure, that connection, that relationship really, really matters. And it doesn't really matter how to do it. You do it your authentic way. Just be yourself and connect with them, but it is the key element that we start with. Now, let's talk about reading with them and some routines. So every child is different, and I'm sure you all have different contexts. So I hope that teachers are providing you with text to read, or they may have a box of books, that you can select from. But what you need to be thinking about is, what is the best way to read with that particular individual? Because the same technique won't work with all. So I'm going to share 4 different ways that we do this as educators, in the classroom. So there are 4 reading routines. So the first one is modeling it, and I'll model each one for you. Okay. The first one is where you read it to them, but you have to model your thinking, right? It's not just reading to them. You have to show them this is what good readers do. The second one is reading it together. We call that choral reading. The third one is echo reading, where I read a line and they read a line. They repeat what I say. And the fourth one is alternating. So I read a line, you read a line. I read a paragraph, you read a paragraph. But you want to be thinking about this because it depends on where they're going to be most successful. For children that are non-readers, we do a little bit more of the work. And our stronger readers, we want them to do more of the work. And then you can also just have them read as well. So, that is a 5th option, but that was the obvious one, right? I went for the other ones today as well. So let me model these really, really quickly. So the first one I called a think aloud. So it's not just me reading, but I'm talking about how I read as a good reader. Okay, I'm adding what my brain is doing. Because when you read, you're having a conversation with the text. Does anybody ever notice that? You're actually talking to the author. That's actually what you're doing when you're reading. Okay? So I'm going to model that. So I'm going to just kind of do this. I'm going to have to turn around so I can read. Sorry, you guys are going to get my back for a moment. I'll come over to the side. Okay. All right, so we're going to read a text about reading volunteers. Okay, so I'm going to read, and I'm going to share with you kind of what my brain is doing as I'm trying to comprehend. I want you to watch what I'm doing as a reader, and then we're going to practice using that later. Reading volunteers play a critical role in supporting elementary students' literacy development, particularly those who may struggle with reading. All right, now I'm thinking about this text. I think it's going to be informational text. I think it's teaching me about what reading volunteers do. I think this beginning paragraph is telling me what this whole passage is about. So when I look at this, I see it's about what reading volunteers do, okay? So that's what I'm going to be thinking about as I read this text. So I have some background knowledge about being a reading volunteer. I know what they do is they go into classrooms, they work with individual students or small groups, right? They work on reading. So I'm going to be reading with that background knowledge in my mind. Okay, I'm going to keep reading now. Their efforts can help bridge gaps in learning and foster a lifelong love of reading. To maximize their impact, volunteers should employ evidence-based practices tailored to the needs of young learners. Okay, I think in that paragraph, I got a really important piece of information. The really important piece of information that I see in that paragraph is that as volunteers, we should use evidence-based practices. But I'm wondering what those are. I'm curious about that. I think I'm looking at the next section. I'm wondering if it's going to telling me about what those are. So I'm going to be reading for that. Do you see my mental monologue that I'm doing? Because when we read, we do that. We're summarizing, oh, that's important. We're asking questions, we're being curious. Children that don't know how to read, don't do that. So when we do a read aloud to students, don't just read the text to them. Tell them, this is what my brain is doing. This is how I'm thinking about it. I'll keep going. All right, so I see a bolded heading. So usually when I read informational text, a bold heading means it's like a big idea, okay? So I'm going to keep reading. Establishing a rapport with students is fundamental. Volunteers should create a positive and supportive environment where children feel safe to make mistakes and take risks. Oh, well, that's a key practice right there. I got in a really important detail. I have to make it safe for them to make mistakes and take risks. Okay, I'm going to remember that. Simple actions such as consistent praise, active listening, and demonstrating something, genuine interest in students' experience can significantly boost their confidence and willingness to engage. So I caught a couple more best practices in that sentence as well. So I wanted to make it safe to make mistakes. I want to do constant praise. I want to listen to what they're saying and demonstrate interest. So when they start sharing something or sharing their ideas, I want to make sure I listen well to that. So those are some key practices I want to remember when I'm working with students. So that's a think aloud, okay? So it's next level above just reading a text to students, okay? So if you are asked just to read to students, then I would add that think aloud, that kind of you're modeling for them and showing them this is what good readers do. So we want to select the right strategy for the right context. So I would use a think aloud if I'm reading a text with a student that's like, I'm going to call a stretch text, right? That it's hard, it's advanced. Maybe it's hard for them to read, right? So that is one strategy I could use if I'm reading a more complex text with a lot of vocabulary, a lot of details, a lot of information. Notice I did it with informational text, so this can be a little bit harder. So that's one strategy. You do not have to do that all the time. But if you have students that don't do that internal thinking in their head, pull it out. And you don't have to do it for the whole passage. You can do it for one page or a couple paragraphs, right? But sometimes we got to show them this is what great readers do, because maybe nobody's ever shown them that, okay? So if you ever work with a student that is just struggling with comprehending the text, you might want to try pulling this routine out with them and trying it. Okay. Our next strategy is choral reading, okay? And choral reading is when we read together, okay? So this can be an individual or in a small group, okay? But here's the nuance, the piece that you need to know. The volume of your voice matters, okay? So you know how to read a text with a child, right? Or the kids that you're working with. But if they need more support with that text, your voice should be a little louder. If they need less support, your voice should be a little quieter. And they're doing more of the work. And then what you really want to do is maybe start with more support and gradually reduce the volume of your voice so that at the end they're doing all the work. Does that make sense? So in education, we call it scaffolding. I'm giving them a lot of supports to get started, and I'm taking them away so they're doing more and more of the work. Okay? All right. So let's do this together, everybody. You ready? You're all going to read with me. Okay, I don't have a good pointer or anything. Sorry, I should have brought one of my cute pointers that I have. All right, but it's a little bit too far away. So let's all read together and notice how my voice changes. Okay. Individualized instruction. Effective reading support requires recognizing and addressing the unique needs of each student. Volunteers should tailor activities to provide the right balance of challenge and support. For example, scaffolding techniques, read alouds, and choral reading can help students progress incrementally. My noise volume, you can make a little, like a piece of paper, and put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and put loud voice, and then you can have a rank. And if somebody's reading at a 5, you can say, okay, I need to bring it down to a 2. This is what it would sound like. So just have a little piece of paper with like, your voice is here, let's bring it down here. Okay? And then somebody just corrective feedback. Okay, that's great. But again, this is a strategy where you're giving more support, but maybe reducing the support over a little bit of time. Okay? Now, you can also, I love this strategy because then I can model. What if you have children that are just being choppy? They read like, effective reading support requires recognizing and addressing. Anybody have that? Yes. So what I can do with choral reading is work with them on reading in phrases. So because they're reading along with me, I can teach them to read more fluidly. So then what I would do is read with me, everybody. Effective reading support requires recognizing and addressing the unique needs of each student. So it's not, I'm physically helping them read with more fluidity. Okay? So that's another time when choral reading could be helpful. All right? Okay. So let's look at our next one. Okay. So echo reading is when I read a line and they read the same thing that I read. The reason I would use this routine or strategy is so that I can model good reading. Okay? Again, I always use this one if I have choppy readers. Okay? So obviously the text is going to be different than this, right? I mean, I'm giving you adult text, right? It would be whatever text they're reading. This is really great with a decodable book. Those that saw my video or were here last year, those are the ones that are just working on just how to read words, basically. And again, you don't have to do the whole book this way. You can just do this with a paragraph or two or a page. But if you want to really help kids with that, this is a great strategy. So that's echo reading, okay? And then the last one is alternate reading, where I read a paragraph or a line, or you do. The other thing I can do is just stop at a word, and you have to fill the word in. That helps them pay attention. So if I have students that don't pay attention while I'm reading, well, I'll read a little bit, and then I'll stop, and then they have to read it. So we're just taking turns, right? My turn, your turn. So if you have ones that can't focus, they need a lot of change, right? You need to mix up your strategy with them, right? You can do this one. It helps them pay attention. Like, oh, wait, I got to pay attention. Oh, wait, I gotta read now, right? So those are 4 routines. Obviously, your 5th one, which I didn't talk about, is they just read it and you listen. I mean, that was obvious, right? But I wanted to show you a couple of different routines that you could try when reading a text, and you do not have to do the whole same one for the whole book. You can change it up on different pages, right? Or if like you get to a page and they're like, oh, they're maybe slowing down a little bit and it's harder for them to read, jump into one of these routines and give them a little bit more support, and then let it go, and let them read the next page. Each of those routines, I have done every one of those successfully with 32 children. I've done them successfully with 6 to 8 children. I've done them successfully with 2 to 3 children, and I've done it successfully with 1. So they will work with any one of those. Okay, that's why I shared them. That's why I have to pick certain strategies to share with you. So I try to pick ones that will work for everybody in the room. So it will work with any of those contexts. The secret is if you have attention, because I had a bunch of people asking, like, what if the kids won't focus or pay attention? You got to mix it up a lot. The more you keep them busy, the more they are doing, the more there's variety, the more likely they'll engage and stay with you. Does that make sense? Yeah. If you're doing all the work, guess what they're going to do? They're going to be like, yeah, whatever. I'm going to watch this great TV show here of this person doing some reading. So I'm going to give you one of my favorite quotes. Whoever's doing the work is doing the learning. Let me say that again. Whoever's doing the work is doing the learning. If you're doing all the work, they're not learning, okay? But sometimes we have to do some of the work, like in the modeling or showing them this is how you do it, but don't stay there forever. You want to get them doing. You want them engaging, okay? All right, the next tip. So having different routines to read with students is really important. The next thing that I want to share with you, and this is on the first page of your handout, now we're going to kind of go into the handout, all right, is a little routine that I always use before reading any text, okay? Has anybody ever tried to read a text that you just weren't interested in? If you don't want to read it, you don't care about it, are you going to read it? No. Now, I might read it if somebody tells me I have to, because I'm going to sit here and be tortured by reading this text, because somebody says I have to, and I'm following the rules, right? But that doesn't work with anybody. And I know all of you have at some point started reading a book or something, you're like, yeah, not me. I'm not going to finish this. You've all done it. Yeah, or skip ahead, right? One of the books I've always wanted to read is The Stand by Stephen King. I hear it's amazing. I cannot get past page 100. I just can't. So, yeah, it's just not holding me. So we have to think about how we get our students excited about reading a text, or at least getting curious about the text, or getting interested in the text, or giving them a reason why we're reading the text. Like, why are we reading Abraham Lincoln? I don't know. So I use a little routine I call prep. We prep to read. Okay, so you're welcome to steal it. Now, I don't always go in this order, but the prep helps me remember. But in this routine, before we read anything, you always want to have the students kind of looking at, well, why are we reading this? What do we think this is going to be about? What am I curious about? What do I notice? What do I already know about this topic? Especially it's informational. So my P is preview and predict. So we look at the text in advance. We browse through it. We look at what do we see, what do we notice, what are we wondering? And we make predictions about what do we think this might be about. That helps people get curious. It helps a learner get curious, because if they want to know something, if they have a question about the text, they're much more likely to want to read it. Like, oh, I want to know about this. The second, my R, is review for text structure. So it really does matter if we know if it's informational or if it's a story or a narrative or a story, because you read them differently. So when you read a story or what's called narrative text, you read for character, setting, and events. That's what you pay attention to when comprehending. If you're reading informational text that teaches you about something, you read for main idea and important details. Those are two very different things. So if a student doesn't know that they're reading informational text, they'll read it incorrectly, because they'll be looking for a character. There's no character in informational text. Sometimes there's a person, but it's not like a story. It's not, those types of things. So it's really important that they know what type of text it is that they're reading. The third is engage prior knowledge. So do you know anything about this? Remember I told you all learning has to connect to what? Prior learning. So you got to connect from the very beginning. And then the last one is, what's the plan? So I want you to think about it. If you go online, I always use sinusitis as my example. You went to the doctor and they told you have sinusitis, right? And so you decide to go to Dr. Google, right? And learn all about sinusitis, and you get this really complicated medical text about sinusitis. Do you read that differently than People magazine? Yeah, absolutely, right? Do the students that you work with know that? They might not. So it's important to stop and say, what do we think? Does this text look hard? If it looks hard, what should we do? Should we read it differently? Does this look easy? Okay, then let's just jump in and read it, right? But we want them to be thinking about, how should I read? Do I need to do anything special? Okay? So on this first page here, and Sean will send all this out to you if you want it digitally, and that link will give you the infographic on it. But these are some sample questions that you might ask for those four. You don't ask all of them. At least one per category. I tried to give you options and choices. So 1 or 2 minutes before reading. It does not need to be lengthy, right? Get them excited about reading it. Connect to it, make a connection, have a purpose. It matters, okay? So starting with making it safe, right? Then getting them connected with the text. And this works with our littles just as much as our older students, okay? Obviously, with the younger ones, we're going to do more of the reading, right? Okay? But you still got to do it in a read aloud. And then when you get to routines, use those different reading routines with them. And then the other thing that is going to help them love reading is being successful. And again, using routines. So you have to support them so that they are successful. So here's what I'm going to suggest for helping them to be successful. Break it down into small chunks. Don't keep going and going and going and going. So depending on the length of the text, stop every paragraph or page and talk about what you learned. Because working memory is hard. And the older I get, the harder my working memory is. I don't know if everybody is having that issue, but I'm like, I've got that, I'll have it for you in 10 minutes. That's where I'm at now. But our working memory, we use working memory when we read. So if we can stop and chunk more frequently, we're going to be more likely to remember it, okay? This will also be good for our students that don't want to focus for long periods of time, okay? Because that's what they're telling you. So when they're unfocused, they're telling you something. They're not being behavior issues. They're giving you data. They're telling you, I need a smaller chunk. So we need to change what we're doing, not change them. Okay, it's important information that they're giving us. All right? Okay, you got to stop and talk every paragraph or page. And even if you read less, that talking and interaction is where the learning is going to occur. Okay? And making meaning of the text. Okay? What I'm going to suggest that you do, especially for those that need more support, is that you create what I'm going to call a visual retell, okay? So in your handout, I've given you two visuals, two organizers. They're called graphic organizers. One looks like this. It kind of has 6 boxes. This is for narrative stories, and I'll model this for you again, right? So basically what we do is in the first box, we put what we find out about the setting or the character, and then we find out about the other, and then we talk about the different events in the story. They're just boxes, but what they can do is draw a little picture, write words, like a couple words. They can do like a quick sketch. But what you do is that you read a section, and then you put something in the box, right? And the students do it. Have them do it. If they can't, then you can do it, but let them do it, right? Because then they have to own it. Like, what do you want to remember from that page? What's important? Then you read a little bit more, and then you add something to the second box. Then you go back and retell the story. You retell what you did. So a long time ago, Johnny Appleseed planted apple seeds everywhere. So they retell. Then you add another detail, and you retell all 3. You just keep adding. I'll model, don't worry. But I'm just trying to explain it first. And then you just keep adding, so at the end, they can retell the story. And they have little pictures or words, and they've practiced telling the story 6 times. So here's kind of what it looks like. So you can do it 1 or 2 ways. You can do it on a piece of paper like I've given you. But what I actually do is I put this paper in a sleeve protector, and I use Post-it notes. So if you can get Post-it notes, and then what the kids do is in each box, they add a Post-it note. Kids will do anything for a Post-it note. Just saying. They really will. I just need the little Post-it notes, and they put something on it, and then they stick it in the box, right? And then I don't need paper. I don't need paper. I just need a few Post-it notes each day when I work with them, and I just use the same master copy. So that's just my frugal teacher tip. All right. So let me model this for you. So Shara is coming up. All right, Shara. So you already know we're going to read Pages of Possibilities, right? And you're really curious. We decided it was a narrative story, right? So that means we're going to read for character and setting and events. That's what we want to pay attention to. So can you take out your narrative organizer? There we go. You ready to go? And you're going to write on there. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop at each page and see what is it that we learned. Okay. So let's read together. All right, so our first page. So you have it. We're going to do some choral reading today. Okay, you ready to go?
Ready.
All right. Margaret had always loved books. As a child, they had been her refuge, and now in retirement, they were her joy. When she came across a flyer for the Read With Me organization, she felt a tug at her heart. The idea of sitting with children and sharing the magic of words and stories felt like the perfect way to spend her time. All right, so what important things did you learn about this place? So this is the beginning of the story. So we probably learned something about the characters or the setting. Did we find out anything? So what I did is I stop at each page and have them capture the most important thing they want to remember, draw it, doodle it, write it, whatever, and then using a physical gesture of some kind, let them come up with it, will help them remember the story. We are out of time, but I do want to give them, can I give them 2 minutes, Sean, just to kind of process what they learned today? What's one thing? So hopefully you got one idea. My goal is to always give you one idea. Hopefully you got reaffirmed that you're doing some good things already. I hope. Yay, we want that. And then hopefully one new idea. So what is one thing that you could take from today to refine your practice? Maybe a little tweak or a little change that you might use with your students.